Good afternoon, everybody. As always, my name is JC, and welcome to my channel, Everyman's Thoughts. In today's episode, I'm going to break down Season 1, Episode 8 of the Amazon TV series, The Wheel of Time. There will be spoilers, so if you haven't already seen the episode, please hit the subscribe button and come back later. With that, you've been warned, so let's get started. As the episode opens, we flash back 3,000 years ago before the world was broken, back into the Age of Legends. Lewis Theron is the original dragon, and he's trying to convince his female Aes Sedai counterpart to marshal their forces and attack the Dark One. She rejects the plan, stating that he's being reckless and arrogant. As we know, he decides to attack anyway, and this is how the male side of the One power becomes corrupted. If you recall, now this pays off the opening scene of the entire series when Moraine talks about how the world was broken by the arrogance of men trying to permanently eliminate the Dark One. Typically, I think this would be something I would rather enjoy. You allude to something early in the season, tell a story, and then pay it off as you approach the end. The problem is this is a complete and frankly baffling departure of what actually happened in the books. In the books, the Dark One was already winning and about to acquire artifacts of great power, which would have ended the game. The Light desperately needed to do something to turn the tide and save the world. The obvious question is then, why would you change this decision from desperate times call for desperate measures to, male pride? I know I don't have the largest audience, but I'll ask you guys directly. Can anyone think of a good reason why you would change this context, except for the promotion of a narrative, woman good, man bad? I know there's been storylines or subtexts that have been dropped in the past because of budget concerns or time constraints, but all you had to do was add the words "we're losing" to that scene and you stay true to the books. In fact, it took them filming 2 scenes to promote the narrative of male arrogance when it would have only taken 1 to stay true to the source material. To further my point, the scene where Moraine talks about male arrogance is immediately followed by the scene where Liandrin talks about how the power is only meant for women and men make it filthy. How is the uninformed viewer going to get the correct context of the themes Robert Jordan actually wrote about when these are the first 2 scenes to open the series? What Robert Jordan actually wrote about was balance, moderation, cooperation, avoiding extremes, things that are still relevant today and things that will probably be timeless. As the opening scene of Episode 8 shows, when men and women were working together as equals, they lived in a futuristic utopia. Compare that to their world of the present day, where after 3,000 years of only female Aes Sedai rule, they're still riding around in horse-drawn carriages and stepping in donkey shit. Again, I don't know why you would make these changes and abandon these themes unless your express intent was to promote a narrative of male arrogance. If you have any ideas, I'd love to hear it because I'm at a loss. Okay, so moving on. As the episode continues, we see Rand and Moraine moving through the Blight. I know a lot of people weren't particularly happy with how the Blight was represented in the show, but considering their budget and time constraints, I think they did a pretty good job. I was also pleased they gave us a little fan service and acknowledged the 7 Towers of Malkir. Although I thought the time in the Blight was represented well on screen given the considerations I mentioned earlier, the scenes themselves did not have the impact they needed to. To this point, Moraine's character's been poorly written, and Rand has not had nearly enough character development that the Dragon Reborn should have at this point. So what are we building on here? A character whose on-screen presence I don't particularly enjoy, combined with a character I haven't had time to become emotionally attached to. They try and rectify this with some exposition as they travel through the Blight, but too little too late. As far as the scenes themselves, the first big one is when Moraine all of a sudden gets stabbed through the back of the head. I have to give the director credit here, even though the entire time you're watching it, you know it's going to be a dream sequence or some other cop-out. It still was timed well enough that your ears perked up and it had a little bit of shock value. It certainly grabbed my attention. During that confrontation, the person they think is the Dark One begins to plant seeds of doubt in Rand's head. Something along the lines of, well, the last time they came with a real dragon and 100 Aes Sedai at his back. You have one Aes Sedai and have never even touched the one power. Rand is completely freaked out, has no way to deal with what he's hearing, so in order to escape the dream, he kills himself. It'll be interesting to see how they handle this moving forward, because in the Wheel of Time you have regular dreams and then you have the dream world. And in the dream world, if you die in real life. So far, they've made everything take place in regular dreams, but we are going to reach a point soon where they're not going to have that option. Or at least I don't think they will. Eventually, they reach the long-lost location where the Dark One is allegedly imprisoned. On the ground, you see a huge seal representing the two sides of the one power, the dragon and the flame of Tar Valon. Almost immediately after stepping onto the seal, the Dark One takes over Rand's mind. He begins to show Rand the world that could be and an alternative perspective to what the Aes Sedai have been telling him. This alternative world is idyllic for Rand. It has Egwene, their daughter Joya, a peaceful house in the country, and all he has to do is use his powers to make it real. Eventually, though, Rand gets his head around the whole scenario and makes the right decision and refuses to cooperate. What's interesting is the reason they chose for his unwillingness to proceed. Instead of focusing on the fact that none of this is real or the fact that he'd have to subjugate the entire world to remake the world to his view, they instead focus on the fact that this isn't the life that Egwene wants. Now, there's nothing wrong with that, and this could be how they thought the story may play out the best, or what they thought might be the most entertaining version of the story. However, if you remember what we spoke about earlier when they unnecessarily changed elements in the story simply to promote a narrative, you do have to be suspicious of what's going on here. Keep in mind that in earlier episodes, when Egwene had to make decisions about their relationship, she chose to forego the relationship in order to pursue her best life. It wasn't about Rand, it was about her. Yet for Rand, it's all about Egwene. Moving on, Rand sees through the manipulation and channels his power through the Sangreal, which is like an ancient powerful artifact, and then shatters the Dark One. Rand also knows that his powers are going to lead to a dark end for both himself and the ones he loves, so he tells Moraine he wants to slip away and asks her to tell his friends that he's died. And I kid you not, Moraine looks at him with a straight face and says, "I can't lie." You ever laugh so hard you wake up your neighbors and you hear dogs barking throughout the neighborhood? That was me in the middle of the night when she actually had the stones to say that line with a straight face. Not 5 seconds later, she bald-faced lies to Lan, the most trusted person in her life. Of all of the issues this show has, the one that astounds me the most is the writers thinking that the semantics in the difference between being deceptive and lying would be enough to justify all of the other characters to look the other way in regards to her BS and somehow try and maintain credibility. Finally, we also learn that Moraine has apparently been permanently shielded from the One Power. Now, in the books, her character doesn't have much of a role in the upcoming events, so this could be an excuse to explain her absence, or far more likely, an excuse to inject her into the upcoming storyline. Yeah, one last thing I almost forgot. When Rand destroys the alleged Dark One, you can see that the Dark One is kind of smiling, or at least smirking. Shortly thereafter, you see Moraine and Lan Mandragoran reflecting upon the broken seal on the ground, realizing that they've been duped, and understanding that there's a long road ahead. Alright, let's move on to the others. We left off with Egwene, Nynaeve, and Perrin realizing that Rand and Egwene took off into the Blight without them. We pick up this episode with Egwene and Perrin coming to terms with the fact that they know they have no way to follow them. Nynaeve does have a way to follow, but she's never going to tell them that. Instead, she communicates with Lan. The scene where Nynaeve and Lan talk about the possibility of pursuing Moiraine and the future of their relationship was one of my favorite of the series. First, it had great fan service as they took text straight out of the books line for line. Second, it has its own little mini cliffhanger as they acknowledge with the problems they're going to face in the future. Are they saying goodbye for now, or are they saying goodbye forever? When the show was announced, I thought Egwene was going to be my favorite character because I liked her story arc in the books. However, Zoe Robbins has done such a beautiful job with Nynaeve that I find myself gravitating towards that character every time she's on the screen. I hope she gets some kind of acknowledgement or award for the work she did in this first season. Next, we have Lord Anglemar gathering his troops and riding out to protect the Gap, even though they know they're going to be slaughtered. Unfortunately, it was about this time we saw just some unacceptably bad CGI and cinematography. Based on what we'd seen in previous episodes, I'm just assuming that they ran out of money. I've been saying for a year that I thought budget issues would hurt this show, and I don't think there's any arguing that anymore. Anyway, so the Gap is overrun and Lord Anglemar takes a spear to the chest. However, if you look closely, you don't see any blood and he's still looking around like, what's he do next, as if he's completely coherent. I half expected him to talk some trash about that Trollocs mother. We're probably going to hear something about that armor that he was wearing in future episodes. About the time the Gap is being overrun, Lady Amalisa gathered all of the other female channelers in a last-ditch attempt to save Faldara. They formed a channeling circle and were able to summon enough of the One Power to wipe out the Trolloc army. Unfortunately, 3 of the ladies had to sacrifice their lives as that much power simply burned them out. Egwene and Nynaeve, being considerably more powerful than the other ladies, were able to survive the event. Now, in the books, it's Randall Thor who destroys the army, so once again we see the dragon reduced in favor of a female character. As we move on to Perrin, as he's starting to have some scenes built around him, it highlights just what a waste of time this character has been this season. I mean, the dude could literally have been written out of season 1 and nothing would have fundamentally changed. What's worse is, remember, the actor that played Matt left with 2 episodes to go in the season, and the characters of Perrin and Rand were still underdeveloped. How bad would it have been had Matt stayed? As Perrin is embracing the way of the Leaf and is a pacifist, there's no place for him at the battle, so he's staying back in Faldara. He inadvertently stumbles across his old friend from episode 1, Padden Fane, who's secretly a Dark Friend and there to steal the Horn of Valyr. We are treated to some excellent acting and narration by the actor who plays Padden Fane, Johan Myers, as he explains the backstory and why these 5 are so important. As Perrin realizes what's going on, he picks up an axe in a scene that should have some impact, but again, because his character is so badly underdeveloped, the scene underdelivers. In fact, the only thing that gives the scene any meaning is when Padden Fane mocks him for already abandoning the way of the Leaf, then humiliates him by turning his back to him. Padden Fane also stabbed Loial with the ruby-hilted dagger. So this will set up some of the more obvious storylines for Season 2 and hopefully reincorporate Matt into that chase. Finally, the last scene, which was pretty cool actually, was your classic cliffhanger. We see a large invasion force coming from the far west. If you've read the books, you know who they are. I'm not going to do any unnecessary spoilers here. For me, this episode was easily the worst of the season and a season finale that badly underdelivered. Perrin and Rand were so underdeveloped that when it came time for them to carry the story, there wasn't enough underneath them to build upon. My hope is next year we get a larger budget and maybe go from 8 episodes to 10. I am going to make more videos summarizing different aspects of the first season, so if you haven't already hit the subscribe button, please consider doing so. Well guys, that's it for me. I will see you next time.